Every tool ever invented was designed to make one human being unnecessary. We just never built tools that could make all of us unnecessary at the same time. Until now. That sentence will feel like an exaggeration to some people. It will feel like an understatement to others. Neither group is wrong. Because what is happening right now with automation and artificial intelligence is genuinely unprecedented in one dimension and completely familiar in another. And the failure to hold both of those truths simultaneously is producing a public conversation about automation that is almost entirely useless, either panicked beyond reason or dismissive beyond evidence. Neither position is looking at what is actually there. So look at what is actually there. Begin with what automation has always been. A machine is stored labor. It is human intelligence and effort crystallized into a mechanism that can repeat the task indefinitely, without tiring, without demanding pay increases, without organizing, without getting sick, without having needs of any kind beyond maintenance and energy. The spinning jenny did not just spin thread faster than a human hand. It made the human hand spinning thread unnecessary. The steam engine did not just move goods faster than a horse. It made the horse, and the human driving the horse, unnecessary for that task. Every wave of automation in history has destroyed specific categories of work and created others. This is the pattern economists cite when they argue that automation has always been net positive for employment, that the handloom weavers who lost their livelihoods to the power loom were replaced, eventually, by factory workers, and then by service workers, and then by knowledge workers, and the total number of jobs in the economy kept growing even as specific jobs kept disappearing. The argument is historically accurate. As a prediction about the future, it is an act of faith dressed in retrospective data. Because the argument assumes that the new technologies displace labor in some domains while creating demand for human labor in others, that automation makes humans more productive in ways that expand economic activity enough to absorb the displaced workers into new roles. The assumption held for 200 years of industrial automation. It held because the machines being built were physical machines. They moved things, assembled things, processed materials. And while they displaced physical labor, they created demand for cognitive labor, for the people who designed the machines, managed the processes, handled the non-routine, the adaptive, the interpersonal. The automation happening now is different in kind, not just in degree. It is not automating physical tasks while leaving cognitive tasks to humans. It is automating cognitive tasks, reading, writing, analyzing, deciding, diagnosing, advising, translating, coding, drafting legal documents, reading medical scans. The domains that absorb the workers displaced by industrial automation are now themselves being automated. And unlike the physical machines of the Industrial Revolution, which required enormous capital investment in hardware, the new tools of cognitive automation are software, infinitely replicable at near-zero marginal cost, deployable instantly across any geography, scalable without limit. The economist Daron Acemoglu, who has studied automation more carefully than almost anyone, makes a distinction that cuts through most of the noise. Automation that augments human workers, that makes them more capable, more productive, and therefore more valuable, tends to benefit labor. Automation that substitutes for human workers, that replaces them rather than enhancing them, tends not to. The question is not whether automation happens. It is what kind. And the direction of the current technological wave is, in his assessment, heavily weighted towards substitution rather than augmentation in the domains where most people currently work. Now look at who owns the automation, because this is where the economic consequence diverges most sharply from the historical precedent. When the power loom displaced the handloom weaver, the weaver could in principle become a factory worker and participate, however modestly, in the productivity gains that the new technology produced. The technology created a new category of work that humans could do. The gains were not equally distributed. The factory owner captured most of them, but workers participated in the expansion through their labor. When a language model replaces a knowledge worker, the worker does not become a language model maintainer. There are not enough maintenance roles to absorb the displacement. The productivity gains flow to the company that owns the model. The company that owns the model has a small number of employees relative to the value it produces. The investors who own the company capture returns proportional to their investment. The worker who was replaced has their income eliminated and no automatic path into the new structure. The returns to automation accrue to the owners of the automation. And the ownership of the most powerful automation technologies in human history is concentrated in a handful of companies, owned by a small number of individuals, headquartered in a small number of cities, whose combined market capitalization exceeds the GDP of most of the world's nations. This is not a description of the future, it is a description of the present. The economist's response is that new industries will emerge. New categories of human work will be created. That prediction may be correct. History suggests it has been correct before. But the question is not whether new work will eventually emerge. The question is, what happens to the specific people whose specific work is displaced in the specific years before the new work materializes? And in whose hands will the productivity gains accumulate during that interval? And how long is the interval? And what is the shape of the new work? Is it comparable in compensation, in security, in dignity, to the work it replaces? The Industrial Revolution's transition period lasted decades and produced conditions, child labor, 12-hour days, industrial accidents, poverty wages, urban squalor, that required generations of organized political struggle to address. The gains of industrialization eventually reached ordinary people, but the transition was brutal for those who lived through it. The comfort of the long-run view is available only to people who are not living in the short run. Now go to the dimension that is almost never discussed in conversations about automation. The relationship between automation and the basic logic of capitalism as a system. Capitalism runs on wages. Workers receive wages. Workers spend wages on goods and services. Goods and services generate revenue for businesses. Businesses invest revenue in production, which employs workers, who receive wages. The circuit requires consumers, and consumers are, in the vast majority of cases, workers. When automation displaces workers without equivalent replacement of their incomes, it disrupts the circuit that sustains demand. The businesses automating to reduce labor costs are simultaneously automating away the consumer base that generates their revenue. Henry Ford understood this in 1914 when he doubled the wages of his assembly line workers to $5 a day. Not out of generosity, out of the recognition that workers needed to earn enough to buy the cars they were building. The business model required consumers. Consumers were workers. Workers needed wages. The insight was structural, not philanthropic. The current trajectory of automation, reducing labor costs while concentrating the productivity gains in a small number of asset owners, disrupts this circuit without offering a structural replacement. If most of the income generated by automated production flows to a small number of owners rather than to a broad wage-earning population, the purchasing power to sustain demand for what is produced has to come from somewhere else. The somewhere else being proposed, in various forms, is redistribution through taxation of the productivity gains, through some form of universal basic income or social dividend, through collective ownership of the automation itself. These are not fringe ideas. They are structural responses to a structural problem. The question of how the gains of automation are distributed is not a question that the market will answer on its own. The market will answer it according to ownership. Those who own the automation will receive its returns. Those who do not will receive whatever the market for their remaining labor will bear, which in a world of abundant cognitive automation may be very little. Now look at what automation does to time, because this is where the personal dimension of the question lands most directly. The promise of automation, the one made since the beginning of the industrial age, is that machines doing work humans do not want to do will free humans for the work, the rest, the creation, the relationship, the experience that they do want. That the 30-hour week is coming, that leisure will expand, that the question will become not how to find work, but how to find meaning in a world where work is no longer required. John Maynard Keynes predicted in 1930 that by 2030 the average work week would be 15 hours. He was confident in the prediction. He was wrong about who would benefit from it. The productivity gains he anticipated materialized. The reduction in required human labor materialized. The redistribution of the freed time to workers did not materialize. The time that automation freed was not returned to the workers whose labor it replaced. It was captured as profit. The working week in wealthy countries has not declined in proportion to productivity gains. The gains went elsewhere, to the owners of the capital that produced them. There is no mechanism in the current economic structure that automatically converts productivity gains into leisure for workers. The conversion requires political struggle, regulatory intervention, collective bargaining, exactly the mechanisms that have been systematically weakened over the same period in which automation has been advancing most rapidly. The question of what automation will do is inseparable from the question of who owns it, who governs it, and what the political balance of power looks like between those who own the machines and those whose labor the machines are replacing. Technology does not have social consequences independent of the power structures within which it is deployed. The same technology in different institutional contexts produces different distributions of the gains it creates. Amazon's warehouse automation reduces the number of workers needed to fulfill orders. It also surveils and manages the remaining workers with a precision that was previously impossible, optimizing their movements, timing their bathroom breaks, eliminating the inefficiency of human judgment from the process. The automation does not just replace some workers, it controls the remaining ones with a thoroughness that no previous management system could achieve. The technology amplifies the power of the institution over the labor inside it. This is not inevitable. It is a choice about how the technology is deployed and to whose benefit. Different choices are possible, but different choices require different distributions of power than currently exist. And the people with the power to make different choices are the people who benefit most from the current choices. Now bring this into your life, into the work you do today. There is a version of your work that a machine is currently doing partially, clumsily, with obvious limitations. There is a version that a machine will be doing better within 5 years. There is a version of you that your employer is calculating the replacement cost of, even if that calculation is not on a document with your name on it. This is not paranoia. It is the explicit stated goal of most investment in current AI development. Every productivity gain is a labor cost reduction. Every labor cost reduction is someone's income eliminated. The question is not whether your work is affected. The question is when, and by how much and what is on the other side. And the deeper question, the one that sits underneath the employment question, is this. If a machine can do what you do, what is it that you actually are? Not what you do for income. What you are, underneath the doing. What in you is not automatable. What in you has value that no optimization function can capture. That question is not economic. It is the oldest question a human being can ask. And the fact that automation is forcing it to the surface, forcing it out of the domain of philosophy and into the domain of the Monday morning commute, may be the most important thing automation is doing. Not the jobs it is taking, the question it is asking about what a human life is for when the work that structured it can be done without it. That question has no comfortable answer. It has never had one. But it has never been asked this loudly or this urgently, or with this much riding on the response.